Chuck.
Hi, Rosie.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask you, do you really think this tool is going to work for all organizations?
I think this is a tool that's widely applicable around the world and in both nonprofit, government, and industry. We've used it in all of these applications. And in fact, some of the biggest proponents are not where it started in England or as it migrated to the US. We're finding in Asia, for example, a tremendous interest and activity in action learning. I think the critical factors are having a group of people who are committed to solving the problem, and they must be a diverse group of people. You can't have, for example, it doesn't work with an intact team because there's no what we call pizza person. There's nobody outside the group that can ask questions that are different than the team itself. You have to have an action learning coach to help guide the learning. You have to have a commitment to asking questions. You have to have a commitment also to learning. In each session, we don't just solve problems and clarify them. We also reflect on what we've learned about leadership, about problem solving, about ourselves, and about our organizations. You also have to have a very compelling problem. Action learning is not going to be useful for what we call a puzzle. A puzzle is a technical issue that I could find an expert to solve. Action learning is used primarily for leadership issues, messy, complex problems for which there's no single answer.
So do you mean to say that could be only used by the top people? Or
no, leaders at any level. It could be used in any context, at any level of an organization.
So can you give an example of where it has been used other than the big leaders at the top, the CEOs, CFOs?
Sure, I do action learning in leadership development programs. I use action learning where emerging leaders, people who are, say, first-line supervisors or people with some leadership experience trying to rise up in the organization, come together, say, maybe once a month, and for 3 or 4 hours we meet, and a person would bring their leadership challenge to the table. An example might be, my team is demoralized. Mm-hmm. We've been cut in our size. We're a service organization. We don't get a lot of the respect that the line people get, and I'm having trouble motivating my team. And interesting, in that particular case I'm referring to, after an hour of clarifying the question, the leader in this problem finally realized that the problem wasn't how do I motivate my team. The leader realized the problem was how do I motivate myself? Because he realized through the questioning that it was his own motivation that was hindering his ability to motivate his team. Other issues that you find in organizations might be how do I get more diversity in leadership positions? Those are a problem I've worked. For a government organization, one of the leaders of a government organization said, my leaders aren't acting like leaders. They're simply getting the task done, but they're not leading and developing their people. So how do I make that happen? So those are just some of the examples of problems we've dealt with in organizations.
By using this particular tool, have you benefited organizations? Has there been any statement by any top personnel?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
And referring to the question to the leader I just mentioned, how do I get my leaders to act like leaders, and how do I get more women and minorities in leadership position? After the project was over, the leader met with the 2 teams that were working on these problems, and he was so impressed by what they had accomplished in the organization in solving the problems and in developing their own leadership capacity that he said, I want this in our organization everywhere, and I want it now. So it really does evoke some very powerful responses in people. And what you find in action learning is that over time, and when you're together for 3 or 4 months in an action learning team, you develop a tremendous camaraderie with the team itself. A tremendous trust develops as a result of working on a tough problem. And we find that people end up staying together for a long time in a unit, coaching each other in a sort of a peer coaching environment. So it builds peer coaching. It helps people develop leadership skills they need to be good coaches, because that's really what you're doing in an action learning session. You're really practicing great coaching skills. The questioning, the reflection, the gaining different perspectives, the helping people understand how to get over barriers and achieve their goals.
One clarity I seek personally is like, see here, currently this video that we did is about, people from different organizations.
Right.
So they can feel free to ask questions of any kind. But
Right.
what if when you're doing an action learning session within an organization, I mean, I might be fearing that if I ask this question, what if my boss, gets annoyed? I wouldn't get the next promotion.
That's a fantastic question. So there's two things that have to happen to build trust in an action learning team. And that is, one, the people have to be committed. They have to show up. Because if some people don't show up, the team begins to wonder, why are they not committed? And it kills trust. The other thing is the issue you build. How do we maintain the confidence that what's said in the group stays in the group? We call that sometimes in the States here the Vegas rule. What's said in Vegas.
So is that a prerequisite?
And it really is. We always ask, what's a ground rule we need to develop so that trust is developed in this group?
So do we have that kind of a
And I think
rule?
I've never really had an issue around trust as a result of that. And I have worked in teams inside companies where there was competition between people for rising up in the organization. But because the nature of the questioning process makes you really listen to other people, unlike any other I've ever seen, it does help to develop this sense of I care about what you're saying, and that in turn helps develop trust between people.
So you would say that the clarity would be equally there as well as here?
Yes.
I mean, there wouldn't be any difference.
I think it's just more challenging when you're operating inside a company and everybody's perhaps peers competing for the same positions in the company. That's more of a challenge, but I've done it and it works, but it's got to be done with some really good ground rules and some accountability.
Got it. So anybody can just come on board and practice an action learning session, or would
Absolutely.
you recommend some pre-readings before, or some kind of a prerequisite for a person to be taking on an action learning session?
Another great question, and that's one of the things I love about action learning, is it doesn't require any pre-training. We can, in 10 minutes, brief everybody about what has to happen to make the session work, give them the ground rules and the steps, and we're off and running, so it can be done very quickly. And one of the things that's really wonderful about action learning is that because the focus is on the question as opposed to the right answer, everyone at the table feels empowered. Because anyone, no matter if you're the employee that's only been here a day, you can still ask great questions and not have to say, oh, what do I have to add, in comparison to there's somebody that's been here for 20 years.
Sometimes
it really empowers everyone to say, well, what about this? And why did you do it that way? So it can be very empowering. And it also equalizes. I find that because of that same phenomenon, you don't feel that sense of hierarchy, even though you may have people from various levels in the process.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rosie.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.